Through the Eyes of Another Pony, Unrevised Equestria Daily Version, by CardsLafter, Chapter 11, An Underlying Tone of Chapter Setting In. Now, for those of you that need it spelled out, Winter Sky had just made a cinematic return. A very cinematic return. Why these special effects weren't in the show, I'm not sure. I guess they cost a lot, but to be fair, there wasn't much violence either, which honestly kinda makes me feel bad to this day. Anyway, there we all were, staring at Winter Sky shining like an alicorn sans the horn. Truthfully, he looked like Celestia. You know, if she had been a male Pegasus with steel blue hair. I remember my mouth hung open long enough for it to get dry. The others had similar reactions, except Trixie. She was very preoccupied with being unconscious. This may come as a surprise, but being knocked out takes a lot of one's attention. Azurflora was the first one to act, slowly approaching with wide tear-rimmed eyes. After a few moments of hesitation, though, she rushed to embrace him. He returned the sentiment, tightly wrapping her in his wings. "1,000 years without you," she wept, pressing her face into his armor as she spoke. "Flora, I'm so sorry." His voice cracked a little, revealing the guilt he had suffered. And they kissed, which was like, pony smooching, right? No, it was sweet and affectionate. In fact, all this romance was really deflating the urgency of the question that we all were thinking. Why did we come here again, and what was so urgent? Though the biggest question on my mind was how Stormwing was going to handle this. When I looked his way, I was surprised to actually see him gone. That worried me, because Stormwing doesn't go anywhere without a bright and loud flash of lightning, which meant he left quietly on purpose. Red flag, every pony. Ahem. Luna coughed to get their attention. "I'm happy for you both, I guess. However, we aren't exactly making excellent use of our time budget by resorting to PDA. Not that you guys haven't earned it and all." "Yeah," I nodded. "We had got problems back at Appaloosa, and as much as I want to spend all day asking questions, we gotta roll." "There's a problem, though," Twilight pointed out, looking somewhat shy about stating bad news. "Azurflora won't be able to come with us." We all gave her a bizarre look, not understanding until Stormwing arrived with the ASCA, not one moment later. He immediately planted his butt on its floor like a waiting dog and didn't even look our way. I got the sneaking suspicion that the family reunion wasn't going to go even remotely well. "Oh, you too?" "Oh, right," Luna murmured, before looking at both Winter Sky and Azurflora. "Lady Inmanpulon probably can't fly on a carriage powered by magic." "Derp." That was me, by the way. I couldn't contribute much more to the conversation, as I was fetching a cigarette and in the middle of lighting it. Winter Sky looked torn, like bad torn. His vocal decision got delayed, however, specifically by the raising of the sun. "Oh no!" Twilight cried out as Luna gasped in horror. I noticed it just in time to light my smoke and promptly let it fall out of my mouth as my jaw dropped. What's happening?" Stormwing called out, suddenly up and ready to throw down again. "Can you not see?" I responded instantly, mentally kicking myself for letting my mouth get ahead of my mind. "Friggin', you're not blind, Storm, okay? When I can make faces at you and you can't see them, then you're blind. Until then, you can't say you are." I snapped irritably, more angry at myself than him. "Just visually impaired or something." "Just shut up and tell me what's going on," he countered, not in the mood for smartassery. Which doesn't compute with me. I have a watch that says smartassery on all 12 points. Good heavens, look at the time. "The sun is rising," Winter Sky called out before looking back at the Azurflora. "Flora, It's okay," she nodded, sadly nuzzling under his chin. "I waited 1,000 years. I can wait a bit longer." I will come back for you," he swore softly. "I know." She smiled up at him. This was the first time I had ever seen her smile, and I have to say she is as cute as Fluttershy when she's happy. "I love you." And then they kissed again, making us all feel awkward while we waited. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was epic amounts of daw, but their moment of happiness was intruding on our countdown to doomsday. How rude, huh? Ruining my exciting moment with your mushy stuff is not very polite. "Twilight?" I distracted myself from the affection by looking at her. "This is where you teleport back, right?" She was distracted by the kissing. Apparently Twilight has yet to see shipping in real life. Damned social lock-ins. "Twilight-chan?" Luna approached and waved her hoof in front of Twilight's face. "Time to go!" "Oh!" She snapped out of it and blushed. Sorry, right, I'll meet you all there." Here, Luna conjured a small anklet and hoofed it to her before she disappeared. "Say my name into that to contact me. That way you can keep us up to date on developments." "Wow, that's actually very handy." Twilight's curious nature honed in on the toy. "I'll have to analyze it later, and no more dawdling." I resisted the urge to call Luna out on stealing human concepts. How unfair of her. I did give her a smirk as Twilight vanished with an echoing puff. Then I caught the last loose end in the form of a blue unicorn still quite content to lay there out like a light. I happily ran over to her and tossed her onto my back before doing the unthinkable. I put her hat on. Yeah, that's right. "Firewall, put that down. You don't know where it's been," Luna called out to me as I trotted back. "It doesn't matter where it's been. It's Trixie," I pointed out to her before glancing back at the two lovebirds. "Hey, you're never gonna miss her if you never leave, you know." Winter Sky sighed sadly before breaking away from her and leaping onto the ASCA, which she was nowhere near, actually, so it was quite a leap. I saw the hair on the back of Stormwing's neck bristle quite a bit. Tense pony is tense. "Awesome. One last thing," I said, turning back to Flora one last time. "Can you throw just a tiny bit of antimatic on Trixie here? The last thing we need is for her to wake up and blow up the carriage." She looked my way, mixed emotions coursing through her. After a moment of hesitation, she did as I asked and clamped a small piece of anti-magic jewelry on Trixie's horn. "Thanks," I smiled at her. "Take care." "Just go, please." She looked down a bit, still not entirely kosher with me just yet. "I just can't." I nodded with a wink before making my way back to the carriage where Luna was shaking her head at me. "What's so special about her anyway?" she asked. "She's Trixie." I used the answer to life, universe, and everything. 42 is roughly translated into Trixie, by the way, just so you all know. Don't ask what language, it just does. "I don't understand." Winter Sky seemed to think we were being serious. "It's best if you just ignore them when they speak to one another," Stormwing mentioned offhand before taking us into low orbit. Okay, maybe not that high. "Why do you like her so much?" Luna was genuinely worried, I could tell. Like there might be something wrong with me, which really isn't fair. She's got plenty of things wrong with her. Such as her desire to troll, and I'm sure she has other flaws like cough up hairballs or something. I don't know, she's a fan favorite. She's an egoistical jerk pony with a penchant for magic and meanness. I shrugged. Same reason I like you so much. She took a swing at me, but I quickly leaned away. Careful, you'll hit the Trixie. Think of how that should discourage you. We call that motivation where I come from, she snapped, but laid off, failing to resist the urge to smile. This obviously was not what Winter Sky had expected, as he just stood there staring at us with a look that told us he wasn't so confident in his allies anymore. So I decided to involve him in the shenanigans via intense interrogation after gently laying Trixie down, giving her back her head. Okay, since we've got time to burn on the way there, why don't you fill us in, big guy? I asked with a hopeful smile. Like I said, intense. Okay, so maybe the only intense part was how fast Stormwing was driving us to Appaloosa, but intense is intense. Fill you in? On what? He arched an eyebrow at me. Seriously? I sighed, somewhat deflated from having to lay it out. Basically the following. You didn't know who you were, now you do. Why? How were you able to speak to me? How can... Let's go with one at a time and start with your first one, he said, holding up a hoof to cut me off. I didn't know who I was because I was fragmented. Body, mind and soul, Luna pointed out with a nod. That explains it. The hell it does. I shook my head as I began to happily pet Trixie, suppressing the inner urge to squee. Break it down for a human, Tex. Very well. Remember when I told you Winter Sky, or rather me, gave Celestia his magic in an ultimate sacrifice? Yup. Well, turns out that sacrifice wasn't actually lethal, he said with a shrug. Something tells me Celestia will be thrilled to no end that she didn't actually kill a pony, I pointed out in jest. Oh no, she's not a murderer, Luna drawled on sarcastically. Just a manipulator. Not so bad, I guess, as long as indirect thought control is all right in your book. Celestia did what she thought was best, Princess Luna. I understand it sounds bad. Winter Sky approached Luna angrily, staring down at her. He obviously didn't approve of what she was implying. Being a leader means having to make difficult decisions. You may not agree with her actions, but the last thing you should do is undermine her. Even speaking in such a way can cause a divide that could affect all of Equestria, especially coming from an equal authority. Luna leaned back a bit, not used to such a direct and lecturing out attitude from any pony that wasn't her sister. I blinked, having been quite caught off guard myself. Some ponies just ooze dominance and authority. Celestia was one. Apparently either her or Winter Sky had rubbed it off on one another. If Celestia can do something she feels is wrong for the sake of Equestria, at the very least you can do the same, by not voicing the dissenting opinion that could hurt some pony. All actions have consequences that affect every pony and everything around you, even just a snide word. Geesh! Even I was a tad cowed, and I was just standing to the side, not saying a word. Winter Sky had obviously put a lot of thought into this. Luna's eyes were wide, not with fear, but rather with shock, as though she had never considered such a thing that made perfect sense. I agreed with the philosophy that every action influenced many actions around it, but to live by such an ideology could be difficult, to say the least. Don't smash that spider. It may kill the mosquito that spreads a new strain of malaria. Apologies. He stepped back and bowed before her. That was out of line, Princess. I may stand by my words, but it's not my place to treat you in such a way. It needed to be said. Stormwing piped up, still off in the corner, his head propped onto the railing of the ASCA. Like a boss. Luna looked chastised, more than insulted in all reality. After a few moments of silence and deep thought, she replied. It's fine, Winter Sky, she said with a sigh. And you're right. What's done is done, and the last thing I should be doing is stirring up conflict over a well-instated misdeed from 1,000 years ago. Phew, that was dicey. I made a dramatic show of wiping my forehead. And now that we're all close friends again, please stick to the story. Mind, body and soul. What the flip does that mean? Too afraid to drop the F-bomb, Fire Doll? Luna teased me. I'm pretty sure every time I drop an F-bomb in Equestria, a brony dies. I nodded in all seriousness. Think of the bronies. Yeah, I know, I used that line before. I'm real ballsy like that. Yeah, I've used that one too. I'm real Moving on. What? Winter Sky and Stormwing both sat in stereo. They were both confused about our earthy talk and not happy about it. Nothing. Luna gave them a dismissal wave. Explain it to the backwater ape. Hey! I resented that. Sorry guys, I don't believe we evolved from chimps. I find Planet of the Apes to be a more plausible hypothesis than that. Not that it should influence your beliefs or anything. I'm just a dude with an opinion. That device really has changed you, hasn't it? Winter Sky tilted his head in confusion before shaking it off. As you wish. Being fragmented is very similar to dying. Your mind, body and soul become separated and each enters a state of inactivity. It involves the magical nexus T. Whoa. You just started to get into technological terminology. I waved a hoof to cut him off as he had done me earlier. Sorry, but Star Trek The Next Generation has been the only show to pull off technobabble in my opinion. Just make it quick, simple and understandable. See? Backwater. Luna nodded before sticking her tongue out at me. I responded by magic-kicking it right back into her damn muzzle. Bam, woman, suffer. Hey! Winter Sky didn't seem to appreciate me magicking his princess like that, and began to go into another lecture before Stormwing sensed what was going on and calmed the situation a bit. Trust me, they do this kind of childish nonsense all the time. Turns out they are quite taken with one another. He threw a glance our way, smirking just a tad before going back to propping his head up on the railing. He blinked before looking at us. I just sat there and blushed, all flustered. Luna decided to rub it in and scooted over beside me before nuzzling at my neck. This led to further loss of composure, and I simply smiled sheepishly at Winter Sky. You realize neither of you are the same species, I assume? I see 1,000 years hasn't done much to dull that rather sharp intellect of yours, Winter Sky, she said with a chuckle. In retrospect, I think she was doing it just to troll poor Winter Sky, but at the time I was getting pony snuggles, so wood, and all that. You realize how weird it is to say that? I mean, my entire life, Laughter and Stoic have never agreed on a single thing. And the one time they do, I have the nerve to scoff at their warnings. I mean, what could go wrong besides everything, huh? Just to reiterate, this should be proof of how imperfect I actually am. And 1,000 years hasn't taught you self-restraint, so I guess we're rather consistent. He countered with a smirk and a shake of his head. I hope you know what you're doing. I never know what I'm doing. I smiled off at no pony in particular, looking damned smug about it. 'Cause, you know, who needs smart when you got awesome? Am I right? Yeah, I don't need a mirror to know my eyes are brown at the moment. That's okay, I'll be smart enough for the both of us, Luna offered before sighing. Okay, in all seriousness, let's lay it out. Basically, body, mind, soul fragmentation is where your body, mind and soul get separated from one another. Clear as mud, glad we had this talk, I nodded. She kicked my flank. That made me sad. I think I'm going to go back to catalog every Luna-caused wound, cut and bruise. Pretty sure I'd have a few dozen pages if I just made a sentence for each one. Shush! We are not finished, she snapped, somewhat annoyed. Then Stormwing helped a bit. It's where your physical form, your life's memories and knowledge, and your actual self and personality get pulled from one another, he explained. Without at least two of these, you aren't actually dead, but you might as well be. You've heard of ghosts? Do they have ghosts on dirt? Dirt? You mean Earth? Lol, dirt. Same difference, he said with a roll of his corn-blue eyes. Yes, we've got ghosties, though we typically don't giggle at them, I said in all seriousness. Luna failed her safe versus will and snickered. Whatever. He rolled those eyes any harder, they were gonna fall out. Not that that would blind him or anything. If you've seen a ghost, you've seen mind, body and soul fragmentation. but even then, something has to awaken that ghost, which is merely a soul with no mind or body.
Okay, so what woke you up, big guy?
I looked to Winter Sky.
My body was revived, actually, he replied. I think David may have finally shaken off the spell Celestia cast upon him.
David?
I tilted my head.
The first human, he answered with a wing shrug. Fun fact, big wings make big shrugs and big jealous unicorns.
Wah! Was his last name Xanatos?
I couldn't help myself. I swear I think Satan could bust out of the ground and threaten to put me through torment everlasting, and my first reaction would be a what the hell or what the devil joke. I suck at seriousness, business, routine.
Oh no,
Luna began to giggle.
It's all gone according to plan. We are playing right into his hands.
We began yucking it up from there. Winter Sky looked at the both of us as though we were nuts, which is fair. I mean, the way we were carrying on, I'm fairly certain we could have been Baker Act.
Sigh, Google it.
At any point if the pony psychiatrists of Equestria ever met us. Storm piped in yet again, sympathetic towards the Winter's plight.
You know, when he first got here, she wasn't that bad. Neither was he, actually.
Storm went back to looking off the rail.
Ever since they met, though, it's been a spiral of immaturity for them both, like a childlike feedback cycle.
It shows, Winter Sky replied. They were totally father and son.
So, anyway, Zed, you think this David revived your body?
I suggested, not taking the bite to argue for my sanity's honor.
Not that I had a hoof to stand on, eh?
Precisely, and that awakened my semi-dormant soul, and I began piecing my memories back together. It was like a voice on the edge of my hearing. At first I didn't trust it, but eventually I began to obey out of need to try something. He looked concerned, as though he still wasn't sure he made the right decision.
I first remembered just David, and thought you were him. When you said you did not know how to find me, I began to regret my hasty decision. Then I remembered part of myself, not all of it, though. I began to wonder if I was David when I contacted you the second time while you were wearing my armor. I was almost convinced that I was when the voice told me about Celestia and that she had placed David under a spell of eternal rest. What really made it believable was my revived body moving around, causing me to assume that I couldn't have been, well, me.
Okay, so the voices in my head come with their own set of head voices. Maybe I'm special? Sup, Dark. We heard you like voices in your head, so we put voices in your head, inside the voices in your head, so you can crazy while you're crazy. Any idea who or what the voice was?
Luna prodded.
None. He shook his head.
Perhaps the being that brought humans here in the first place?
Maybe that's just normal for those recovering from being fragmented, I offered.
Nope.
Stormwing immediately responded.
Mm-hmm.
Luna shook her head.
No, that's not how it works.
Winter Sky agreed with them.
Is there a book or something that I can burn on the subject?
I felt exceptionally stupid.
No, cry some.
Luna teased before looking back to Winter Sky.
Continue.
There's not much else to say. I was able to observe events and continue to piece memories together before I finally, just this morning, remembered that I am who I am. Then I knew that I needed to guide you and Azoflora here to revive myself, so that I could assist in freeing Princess Celestia, he answered with a wing shrug. That and the voice told me of a traitor in your ranks that would prevent the elements of harmony from being used.
That's when we all looked at him like he was insane. No pony in their right mind would side with Nightmare Soul unless they were being controlled. Not that was out of the question, it's just... He worded it to sound like some pony was going to willingly go out of their way to betray us.
Who? Luna asked, giving him a look of askance.
All it said was a colt of white and yellow,
Winter Sky shook his head as though that weren't enough. We all went silent. We were all thinking it, but no pony wanted to say it. Finally Stormwing took that leap. "Blue blood," he murmured. Luna instantly began to rebuke him and his suggestion, but stopped before looking down sadly. She had been thinking it too. Hard to legitimately bust the guy's chops when you're guilty of the same thing. I don't know, maybe a year ago, but today? I don't want to point any hooves before it's all said and done. We got Winter Sky, so things are looking up, right? I nodded optimistically. I so did not want to believe that Blue Blood would betray the cause after that talk we had. Let me call Twilight and see how things are going, at least. Let's not celebrate too early. She lifted up her hoof with the matching ring on it and furrowed her brow after a moment. She's not answering. So, leave a voicemail, I reasoned to her. Here, let me do it. Without asking, I magicked it right off her and held it up to my ear. Call Twilight Sparkle. It's not supposed to go that way, she said with a smirk. Oh, and you're the expert? I was disappointed when I didn't hear a ringtone. Worst cell phone ever. Well, I know more about pony and human culture than you do, technically. She winked at me, incurring my ire as she took back her toy. Yeah, I was just kinda skittish about the upcoming battle and was trying to pull my usual nonsense of be silly to keep my fears at bay. Son of a... let's not forget which of us is actually a human, I snapped before looking up at Winter Sky. Women, huh? He was not amused. He looked back out into the horizon without so much as a suppressed grin. This further deflated me, and I simply laid down, sighing softly. Luna must have sympathized with my plight and simply walked over to stroke at my mane with a laugh. Don't worry, Firewall, she smiled. Sometimes you're just annoying. It happens. Sometimes, Stormwing piped in. Yeah, he's a sweetheart like that. Screw Captain Stormwing. Why doesn't every pony love me? I asked sarcastically. Well, I kinda like you, she laughed as she continued to brushy me, which was just making me yawn. I think I mentioned before that anything that messes with my hair chills me out and makes me tired. That still applies. No, you don't like me. I called her out on that. You like tormenting me. I get the two confused sometimes. She gently bonked me on the head. Catch a nap. You too, Storm. We need you guys fresh for the fight. Actually, I'll fly, Winter Sky offered. Luna gave a wing shrug and looked back over to Stormwing. Sure. Stormwing gave a similar wing shrug and relinquished control over to Sky before moving to the back of the carriage. Why does every pony gotta rub in that they have wings, I wonder? Is it just a thing with ponies that have wings? Whatever. Turns out he was a tad slower than Storm, but the difference wasn't very significant. What was significant was Storm curling up and stuffing himself in the corner, smelling extra antisocial. I pawed on over to him, my body mostly still prone to the floor of the ASCA, with her poking his wing. Hey, I poked again. Go away. He didn't punch me, so that was a good start. Nuh-huh, I declined. What's wrong? Nothing is wrong. He flapped a zappy wing at me, facing the back of the carriage and away from me. My toasty charbroil breath there isn't. I poked again. Firewall, I've beaten creatures twice your size for less. He reminded me, still refusing to look my way. He's such a kidder. My little pony, I sang as I gently brushed his wing. Firewall, leave him alone, Luna called out as she tucked herself in the opposing corner. He's not in the mood. I pouted at her, but got the princess's glare of doom in response. It's like the Fluttershy stare, only you run the risk of death by heart attack on the spot. I hung my head and began to paw away from him, before turning back one last time and whispering. I think I'm pregnant. Stormwing, you're the father. I just wanted to let him know.
I'd hate it if our positions were changed and he didn't tell me. That'd just be inconsiderate.
Firewall, I swear to Celestia I will knock you out so hard that Luna will have to go back in time to prevent us from ever meeting.
He finally lifted his head and craned it my way. He looked so angry actually isn't a strong enough word, but it will have to do. War, is that a death threat? My jaw dropped. Ew. Luna lifted her head, glaring at us both irritably. You know what? I always wanted to try out time travel. Go for it, Storm. He's earned it. I object to this thinking and all those supporting it. I objected. Then shut up and leave Storm alone, Luna ordered before tapping the spot right beside her. Come here. I sad-faced her. Closest thing I've ever got to the stare, which wasn't enough, unfortunately. After tapping again, I pawed over to her and pouted. Go to sleep, she demanded. I rolled over and crossed my hooves, then she cheated. She began to brush at my hair again. I was bitter and tried to pull away, but she grabbed my head, pulled it right back, set it where it was right where it was before, and continued to knock me out in the softest way possible. I hope my snoring keeps you up, I grumbled lazily. You don't snore. How she knew that, I'm not sure. Maybe she watched me in my sleep? That would be so creepy. Don't go to sleep. Damn it, I whined before shortly passing out. Today's dreams consisted of humanized events of what was actually going on. I mean, we were still pastel-colored, but we were human-ish. Still had tails. I'm not into furies or anything, and I'm not trying to say there's anything wrong with them, but this was weird. I'm not going into details, all right? Specifically because my subconscious has terrible ideas on just how humanized ponies might look. I mean, humanized Luna had. I'm actually going just to stop here. I don't want to hurt anybody. You can thank me later. I eventually was yanked from my bizarre dream from Luna shaking me and demanding I bring myself to consciousness. As per my norm, I wasn't in a rush to get up. I want to ride the pony. I rolled over. You are acting extra stupid today, do you know that? She hollered at me. Storming, zap him, hard. Negative. I jumped up, wide awake. Not surprisingly at all, Storming set his hoof back down, looking somewhat disappointed. Trixie demands her release. My favorite ego pony cried out. Apparently she had woke up and was none too happy about her new jewelry. I thought it looked great on her, but then again anything looks great on Trixie. Deal with her before I throw her off, Luna growled at me. Her voice reminds me of a tone-deaf banshee I once vanquished, Winter Sky murmured, looking like a little stressed out. I got up lazily before looking over to Trixie, sitting across the carriage with her head held high and her eyes refusing to grace any of us with her attention. I gave every pony a look before sighing and cantering her way, dropping my plot down and looking at her with content smile. Hello, Trixie, I said brightly. Remember me? Fireball, yes? Remove this accursed ring from my horn, she barked angrily, narrowing her eyes my way. But it looks so pretty on you, I pointed out to her. Yeah, I was tired. I could practically hear the eyes of every pony else rolling around. The great and powerful Trixie does not care about its fashionable qualities. She rebuked my kind words with her own harsh ones. Well, Trixie, you see, it goes like this. You lost the fight, champ. We won. And now you're like our prisoner. I scratched at the back of my neck, unable to think of a nice way to put it. And prisoners, they don't get to really make demands. She gave me a skeptical look before turning her pretty blue nose back up at me. Fireball, you are testing Trixie's patience. She will not tolerate this for much longer. Trixie, I don't want to have to break out corporal cuddling. I'd snuggle you into submission, and that would just be embarrassing, I warned her with a sigh. Especially with Luna watching. She might kill me. Might? I heard a certain Alicon pipe in. "Your threats are hollow to the great and powerful Trixie." She stuck a hoof in my face to show she meant business. "I will say it one last time."
"Please, let it be the last time."
Stormwing groaned from behind me. "What if I told you, Trixie, that I'm willing to melt that little ring so that it never comes off your horn?" I offered with an apprehensive nod. That got her attention. Both her hoof and jaw dropped in horror as she let that thought run its course. You wouldn't!" Her eyes were wide with shock. "I'm just trying to get you to play ball. If you had won, I certainly wouldn't be giving you a hard time." I was such a liar. As it stands, though, I'm the winner here, and you're in the timeout box. If you want to get out of it, you're going to need to play by our rules until you are released. Keep up the attitude and loud demands, though, and I will remind you that life can always get much worse. So you just sit there, be cute and awesome, and we'll see about getting the ring removed eventually. You give us any more grief, though, and I'll make good on that promise. You're getting the soft-knit glove treatment right now. Don't ruin it by making me take them off. Capiche? Ugh. Threatening ponies was awful on my conscience, and the fact that it was Trixie only made it twice as bad. I cried on the inside a little. I blame my morning crankiness more than anything, or mid-noon afternoon crankiness rather. Nap crankiness. She started to tear up. My ears drooped and my eyes widened with unfettered fear as the awful realization began to set in. Shit! I immediately turned and ran behind Luna. "She's going to cry. Do something. Give her a treat or something." "What?" "I'm freaking wimp, okay? I can't handle girls crying. I nearly passed out when Scootaloo cried." I begged and pleaded, grabbing hold of Luna's side and shaking her for emphasis.
"Can't I just knock her out?"
Stormwing offered. "Yes," Luna replied.
"No,"
I answered at the same time. Trixie, however, just laid down, turning away from us and hiding her face under her front legs. At first, I merely wondered if she was going to try and get some sleep, or maybe drown us out by covering her ears. When she began to give off a telltale quiver, though, I completely fell apart on the inside. I felt so bad there just isn't a proper way of summarizing it. Stormwing didn't seem not to care. Winter Sky was pretty much ignoring us, all in favor of preserving his sanity, lest our crazy infect him, and Luna merely looked away, her face scrunching as though she had licked a bleach pen. My lower jaw was making demands to tremble, so I kinda bit down to deny it the privilege. It needed to stay put to help stave off the irrational emotional tide welling up within me. Luna turned to look back at me as my vision got a little glazed. "Don't!" Her voice was quiet. "I'm trying not to." I was 2 steps away from whimpering. "Firewall, I don't know what's gotten into you today, but I swear to all things pony, you had better not," she murmured. Even with stoic helping, it was incredibly difficult to not disobey Luna. For those of you that need it spelled out, laughter, my guilt, and fanbroniism was making certain demands of my tear ducts. I was not willing to let them, however, not until Trixie let out a sniffle. Then I was forced to clap my hoofs over my eyes and let out a sniffle of my own.
"You're kidding me."
Storming couldn't help but snicker at me. "Shut up, Storm!" I coughed out. If there's one thing I hate more than being emotionally out of control, it was being made fun for it. "Trixie's crying, y'all. This is serious business. Ferizzle." "You had best not doing what I think you're doing under those hoofs," Luna warned me. "I'm not." I lied. Luna pulled at one of my hoofs in an attempt to discover the truth. I pulled away from her with another sniffle. Without warning, she magicked my hoofs away from my face and revealed probably the most pitiful, tear-streaked face I ever failed to conceal. She actually glared at me for a few seconds before cracking. Within moments she went from glare to neutral to snickering to outright laughter. I didn't see what was so damned funny, that's for sure. She gave me a hug, still chortling at my expense. "You're such a loser," she giggled before kissing my cheek. "You big baby." "You're a jerk." I tried to push her off of me, causing her to laugh again. "Get off me, jerky corn. You're supposed to be a shy sweetheart, remember?" "I was before you got here," she reminded me before releasing me with a sigh. "Fine, I'll make it better." I wanted to point out that at no point was Luna ever shy, nor was she sweet. Unless by shy and sweet she meant bossy and abrasive. If that were the case, she was pure cane sugar soaked in corn syrup and mixed with concentrated Fluttershy. With that, she turned and cantered over to Trixie and knelt down beside her. She gave her a poke with one of her wings. "Trixie? Just go away!" Trixie cried out from under her hooves. "Master David was right about you all." That's when we all nearly died. Or maybe just me and Trixie. More likely just me. As for why, upon hearing the words Master David, Winter Sky lost all control of the ASCA. I was actually the quickest to regain control of the carriage and right us all before looking his way. You are not allowed to drive anymore," I said quite pointedly. "My sanity's insurance just went up and I'm already behind on the payments." "You know David." Winter Sky approached Trixie, completely disregarding my complaint. "Tell me how." She seemed surprised at first, but her face became stern after a moment to collect herself. "The great and powerful Trixie does not have to answer to a forgotten relic," she snapped defiantly. Winter Sky was not pleased by this answer. He started towards Trixie, and judging by how cold the air was getting, I could only surmise that he was going to get his answers out of her one way or another. Luna stood up, placing herself between him and Trixie. "No, Winter," she said, shaking her head. Winter Sky paused and snorted a bit of frosty steam before offering his rebuttal. "She has information, extremely important information. Information that we need." "Trixie is not afraid of you." Man, she was really trying to get herself into trouble, was she not? "She will never bend to interrogation." "We'll see about that." He took it as a challenge and began to approach her again. I decided to slip between him and Luna. It's a line, every pony get in it. Before smiling my charming smile. Though I was much preferring it to be less charming and more disarming at the moment. "Hey, now, let's not fly off the handle, right?" I chuckled a bit, hoping I wasn't sounding as nervous as I felt. "I'm sure we'll get our answers one way or another. I mean, I agree we need to know more about the opposition here, but there's no way I'm going to let you hurt some ponies so you can get some answers that may not help us at all." "You intend to stop me?" he growled. Man, he really was just like Stormwing. At least Stormwing looked cute and cuddly.
I mean, if I have to, I guess." I forced myself to not cower and simply kept a poker face. Then he lunged at me. The only thing I could think of was, why? As I hit my inner panic button and rather quickly fell into a state of not knowing what the hell to do. I got lucky, however. Stormwing intercepted Winter Sky and bucked that huge pony right in the face. We were all shocked. Even Trixie was just standing there, sensing the gravity of the situation, even if she didn't comprehend its meaning entirely. "Back off." Stormwing was already sauntering back over to his corner. "Or I'll have to break your promise to Azure Flora for you." With that, he flopped back down, preparing himself for more sleep. Winter Sky was simply reeling from what had just happened. His son had just stepped between him and a human and bucked him one in the face for stepping out of line. I don't think he was hurt physically as much as he was psychologically thrown for a loop and confused as hell. "Why don't we all just agree and shut up and leave each other alone?" Luna suggested to every pony, "before things escalate even more." "Done." Stormwing responded from his corner, his voice somewhat flat and tired. Yeah, I finally gulped as I slid back off to my corner. Luna looked back at Trixie, who nodded cooperatively, suddenly not so eager to antagonize her apparently aggressive captors. "Good," she smiled cheerfully. "Winter, take control. We are catching more shut-eye. We are still a couple of hours out. I figure just wake us up before we get there." He didn't respond for a minute, but he finally got around to it after I let him take control. "Yes, Princess." I curled back up for more sleep, ready for this trip to be more than over. When I felt silky soft mane using my midsection as a pillow, I looked up to see Luna making herself comfortable. "What happened to leave each other alone?" I asked with a smirk. "What happened to shut up?" she countered and shut her eyes. "Deal with it. Just try not to cry on me or something." My poor abused feelings.
"You two can it already," Stormwing groaned sleepily.
I gave up and simply allowed my anxiety to be put on hold long enough to pass out. Luckily, this one was dreamless. As weird as they were getting, I count myself fortunate that it wasn't otherwise. It wasn't much of a deep sleep, fortunately. I say fortunately because I was rudely interrupted yet a second time. I think I'm like 2 for 9 naps of uninterrupted sleep so far. Those are terrible odds. 8 out of 9 is just not good enough, so to have a quarter of that is just downright pathetic.
"Incoming!"
Winter Sky yelled out, waking us all from our slumber. I'll say this, his yelling voice is mighty indeed. It shook the foundation of the earth, or maybe just the ASCA, but such details were meaningless at the time. We were instantly awakened, one and all. It scared me enough to wonder if I just should jump off and save every pony the trouble of worrying about me. That was a laughter thought, and after receiving his lashes, he promptly went back to his little corner and was told to shut the buck up.
"Shadow Archons!"
Storm cried out before taking off with a crack of lightning. Sure enough, as I oriented my surroundings, I spotted several dozen Shadow Pegasi and a few dozen Shadow Archons off in the distance. I felt my insides tighten up in fearful anticipation in record time. I looked to Luna, who smirked at me, silently assuaging my worries. She then nodded over at our captive pony, wordlessly telling me to look after her. When I did, I expected to see Trixie to look hopeful or defiant even. In all actuality, though, she just looked sad, as though she wasn't excited about the possibility of a rescue. "You okay, Trixie?" I just blurted the first thing that came to my mind. Trixie looked down and sighed, not speaking right away. I swapped glances with Luna, a tad confused. "Best of luck," she replied. More swapped glances between confused ponies took place. I would have pressed for what was the matter, but we were out of time. As the first Shadow Archon closed the gap at amazing speeds, Stormwing zoomed up behind it and lit it up with one nasty taser hoof. After holding it there for several seconds, he bucked it away and let it go into freefall. I gasped and watched it plummet over the edge before it finally righted itself and strained to make its landing as safe as possible. Not sure how I would have reacted to seeing a pony fall to its death, but I doubt I would have simply shrugged it off. "Firewall, take the carriage," Winter Sky commanded, before leaping out to intercept a second Shadow Archon. I caught control of the ASCA, low to the ground. As the Shadow Pegasi began closing in, Luna began blasting them away with rays of magic, her accuracy pretty solid, all things considered. Trixie cowered to the back, as though she was more fearful of the situation than we were. I guess this is where I tell you about red flags, but honestly it's pretty obvious. "Princess Luna!" Twilight cried out from absolutely nowhere. That threw me off for a second, and my first reaction was to completely dismiss the possibility that I was insane. I'm a fire-breathing pony. I'm flying on a magical carriage in the land of Equestria. Voices in my head? Yep, all was normal. Luna lifted her hoof and spoke into her shiny phone bracelet thing. "Twilight, we are under attack by the shadow ponies. Are you all right?"
she yelled out, pausing to telekinetically toss one of our attackers into one of the others, causing them to barrel over a third.
Appaloosa is under attack too, the bracelet replied. We're doing our best to fight them off, but their numbers are practically endless. Nightmare Soul is being held back by the Sky Archons for the moment, but they're starting to tire. We need help. I'm on my way, Luna replied before looking at me. Firewall? It's fine, I nodded back at her, turning my head long enough to incinerate a Shadow Pegasus. I'll be okay. She ran up to hug my neck tightly. Stay safe. That actually made me feel 1,000 times better. I will. Now get out of here. I leaned on her a tad before looking back at the Shadow Pegasi tailing us. She nodded before kissing my cheek and stepping back. Her horn began to glow softly. Just remember, you gotta protect Trixie. Trixie looked a tad confused. Where I come from, we call that motivation, I replied with a sad smile, eventually shooing at her with a hoof. Go! With that, she vanished. I felt sick deep down inside. I mean, everyone dreams of going on adventures and all, but what people don't realize is that the fears you never had to face will grip your heart and squeeze it like a vice. Your breath comes short, and your awareness is impossibly focused to a degree that is disorienting. Doesn't make sense in words, but yes, such intense focus can literally bother and cause the untrained mind to stumble over every last little thing. I took a long, deep breath, shaking off the worst of it before reminding myself that everything would be okay and that ponies would triumph. Well, Trixie, it's just you and me now. You ready for this? I smiled back at her. I don't... She looked up, her eyes filled with worry rather than her usual exuberant confidence. Her fear, though unexplainable at the time, was unsettling. I had to fix that. Hey, none of that. Let's try again. Is the great and powerful Trixie ready for this? I turned to face her a bit more, scowling a tad to complement my determined grin. She looked utterly baffled for a few moments before standing up and nodding, throwing her cape back with a hearty laugh. Ha! It is they who should be asked if they are ready for the great and powerful Trixie! She cried with a stamp of her hoof. Hells yeah! I yelled and stepped on the gas. I tuned out everything else and focused on aiming for Appaloosa as hard as I could. Funny thing about flying, just because you can see it off in the distance does not mean you are close. Still, I aimed to get there as quickly as possible. Due to my focused attention, I didn't notice the Shadow Pegasus that landed behind me until it was already there. It struck at me with its hoofs, grazing my flank and sending sensations of pain throughout me that I had never experienced before. Instinctively I bucked it away, and to my surprise, Trixie pounced on it right away, stomping on it until it poofed away. She looked at her hoofs with a grimace, examining the black marks it had left on them before showing me a pained smile. I wasn't sure why she was against the shadow ponies, but I wasn't complaining. I rubbed my own offending spot with my tail and was relieved that the pain was already fading away. That was close, I murmured as Trixie made her way to the side to see if more were headed our way. Ha! The folds cannot even keep up! Trixie hung her head out and gazed at the shadow Pegasi falling behind. Woo! I glanced back just long enough to confirm before facing forward again. Home free! It pretty much was too, with me able to outspace the lesser shadow ponies and the greater ones occupied by Stormwing and Wintersky. There was nothing to do but keep rolling. I pulled out a cigarette and lit up, prepared to stay on task for the next 20 or so minutes as I closed the gap. As I began to pass over the orchard, I heard Trixie shriek. I was struck with nostalgia, remembering how she screamed when the Ursa Minor crashed Ponyville. Archon! She ran up to me and pointed out into the sky. I remember my first encounter with the Sky Archon altogether. It went something to the effect of BAM! And today was no different. In the time it took me to turn my head and see the Shadow Archon, he was already tackling me.
This sent all three of us flying off the carriage, and out of pure impulse I grabbed Trixie. I kid you not, I rolled my eyes as we began to fall, enraged that this was the third time I would take a fall for another pretty pony. I think I need to get myself checked. This was an unhealthy habit I've developed. Last time I do this, I groaned, just before settling to the ground. Guess what, every pony? Habitually taking falls from semi-dangerous heights doesn't get any easier with repetition. Judas on a hoe, why me? Why did you? Trixie was kind enough to get off my poor whimpering form and was staring down at me. Are you all right? Yeah, I groaned as I slowly got to my feet, coughing from having all my breath knocked out of me. I do it all the time. The Shadow Archon landed nearby, with a thunderous crash, flicking its tail in anticipation. I was wondering why it didn't strike right away while I was recovering, but it became obvious that it was waiting. I glanced at the cutie mark and noted the Fury Comet. It was Hotshot. He wasn't a mindless shadow pony. He was a living, thinking creature that was being controlled, and he wanted a fight. I narrowed my eyes and looked at Trixie, coughing one last time. Trixie, get to Appaloosa. Tell them I sent you. If they want to arrest you, let them. What? She wasn't cozy to the idea. Who would be, right? I'll come find you when I finish up here and vouch for your release, I promised her with a smile, reaching over with my hoof and pulling the ring off her horn. I instantly felt much colder all over, temperature-wise, that is. I dropped it and felt the magic rekindle almost instantly. But what if... I can't just... she murmured, her eyes downcast. I can't. I'm sorry. Do it, I snapped impatiently. It's okay. Everything will be fine. Promise. She blinked, a tad taken aback. Shadowshot, I don't want to call him Hotshot, but he's not a shadow pony either, gave a loud stomp of his hoof, not enjoying his weight. She looked his way, then back at me before taking off. There was no way I could force her to do as I said, but there was always hoping for the best, am I right? Okay, I sighed before looking back to Shadowshot, cutting a glare his way. You want to fight, don't ya, buddy? I don't think he could speak, but he reared up and stomped down, flaring up a gout of shadowy lightning around himself. He was eager to get it on, it seemed. I pulled out a cigarette and lit it, taking a long drag before smiling. Yeah, gonna get one. With that, I went into flame form and took one more drag before incinerating it. As though the starting gun had been fired, we dashed at one another. I spat a fireball at him, causing him to veer off his path and to land against a tree before using it as a brace to launch himself at me. I turned towards him before diving on my side, skidding under him as he just barely soared overhead. I took a page out of Stormwing's book from his Race with Rainbow Dash by snagging Shadowshot's tail and yanking him down to the ground. Without waiting, I pounced onto his back and forced him to the ground, stomping on his left wing to pin him down. Not a bad start, right? It didn't last. You know how a goose can smack you with its wings and break your arm? That's called a wing buffet. Not the all-you-can-eat kind either. Yeah, that applies to Pegasi. He caught me in the neck with his other wing and snatched the other out from under me, causing me to stumble. He literally cartwheeled, apparently Pinkie Pie has the markings of a Sky Archon, away from me, catching me under the chin with his retreating hoof as he put some distance between us. He took advantage of my disorientation by doing a body check, knocking me back into a tree, which I bounced off of like a hacky sack. Every moment I live is agony, I coughed painfully, blinking to alleviate the haze that was plaguing my eyes. Even with my fire shield going on, that hurt. A lot. You know those silly cartoons? Yeah, best start believing in cartoons, Miss Turner. Yeah, in one. That have the character just kinda stumble around after they got their face clogged for some reason?
That actually happens. I spent the next 4 seconds just trying to not fall on my face after getting up. Shadow Shot was obviously not a pushover, therefore I needed to take things a little more seriously. Just as my head began to clear, my opposition took off at me in a soaring lunge. I snarled and simply turned up the heat before dashing right back at him. I had no intention of playing chicken, however. Instead, just before the impact, I turned on a dime and bucked a huge cloud of dust at him. It worked with Nightmare Soul, and sure enough, it worked with him. He went head first into the dirt cloud, coming out to greet my fire-rest front hoof. The impact actually hurt my entire front leg, so I can only imagine how he felt about it. He stumbled back a few paces, looking as though he was no longer entirely awake. I simply jumped at him, bursting him in the face once more before he got wise enough to jump back and take flight. "Come back here, you yellow whore!" I shouted profanely, belching a wave of fire at him, to which he responded by dodging and diving back at me. He was fast enough to make a quick tag and get away before I could get back at him. That tag, however, was terrific and forced me to give an almost girly shriek once I seized up. He gave it a second try, and I responded by dodging away and slapping his extended hoof with my tail, searing it pretty nicely. I began to pant. I wasn't tireless by any stretch of the imagination, and getting a powerful jolt of electricity has a tendency to suck the strength out of you. This back and forth was cool and all, but I couldn't do this forever, and judging by the way Shadow Shot was suddenly taking a less dangerous avenue, it seemed he wasn't so certain about his own chances either. "Had enough?" I smirked, causing him to snarl and fly above the trees. At first I thought he was running away, but I was quickly proven wrong when he came crashing down at me. I just barely got out of the way in time and did not hesitate to start running when he zipped back off into the sky. He chased me throughout the orchard, trying to crash down top of me several times. Luckily, I was fast and maneuverable enough to make myself a difficult target, but that didn't mean I wasn't in danger. It wasn't long before I got tired of this and decided to get a little creative. He wasn't being subtle about waiting to attack, simply floating around lazily until he had a decently safe shot to take. So I spotted a nearby tree and dashed for it, making a tempting beeline for him to get a lead on me. Sure enough, he took the bait and came for me, trailing a line of black lightning in his wake. As he did, I sprinted up the tree and used it to ramp off, flying straight at him. He wasn't ready for that, nor was he ready for my front hoof connecting just under the jaw. "Sure you can!" Yup, I think that officially qualifies me as a nerd. It wasn't a dream. I made it happen. He was mostly out of it, for which I was grateful. As we smacked and bounced along the ground, I landed with a modicum of true grace for once, suppressing my urge to squee at the copious amounts of awesome I had just pulled off, before running over to make sure he was out. Sure enough, I had beaten me a Shadow Archon. He wasn't completely out, but he wasn't struggling anymore, that much was for certain. Good game. I pat him on the head before letting out a relieving sigh and taking in my surroundings. We were at the edge of the orchard, and the town was in sight. Things were turning out pretty spiffy so far. As I began to leave, though, Shadow Shot actually started getting to his feet and took haphazard flight. I thought he would fly away, but he actually flew way over me and began to make his way into town. I took off after him, looking for a way to ground him again before it became less of a priority thanks to what I saw upon entering the city. It wasn't horrific, I suppose. That doesn't mean it looked great either. A lot of ponies were being carried by less wounded, and though I was extremely relieved to not have to face the reality of death in Equestria, that didn't make it any easier to hear the crying. It had been a full in the battle, which I was grateful for. I did not want to do any more fighting, especially now that I was beginning to feel the damage. As I made my way through town, I noticed a lot of ponies were stopping to stare at me. I ignored them at first, but as it became more and more apparent that I had something on my face, I simply paused and looked around. "What?" I tilted my head. "I get some toilet paper on my hoofs or something?" I checked. No TP. "Firewall?" I heard a familiar voice come up from behind me. I turned back to see Applejack staring at me all wide-eyed. I was a little worried when I saw the black smear over one of her eyes. Guess she got into a bit of fighting herself. What was surreal was how her eye color was gold rather than green. Other than that, she seemed perfectly normal, so I didn't stare and call her a freak or anything. "Hey AJ, why's every pony staring at me all weird like?" I asked her with a tired chuckle. "That's you!" she cried. "Firewall, why are you on fire, Sugar Cube?" Oh, I had entirely forgotten to let that die out. With but a thought, the flames dissipated. "Sorry, every pony, I'm not actually on fire." Most every pony went about their business after they realized they didn't have an invader or victim on their hoofs. "It's good to see ya." Applejack smiled at me, having calmed down considerably. "You too. That doesn't hurt, does it?" I nodded at her remark. "Not as much anymore. I reckon it should be fading here soon enough anyway." She gave a chuckle, rubbing her eye with the hoof. "Applebloom thought it was the coolest looking thing she ever saw." "The gold eye does look kinda cool," I agreed with a smile. "Where's every pony else, and did no one see that shadow archon flying overhead?" As though I had triggered some pony's queer, Starlight and Shadowshot crashed into a nearby bale of hay, tangled up in a fight. I actually moved to help her until I realized that it was entirely unnecessary. It wasn't the fight that was going down. Rather, Starlight was clinging to Shadowshot and he was tiredly trying to pull away from her. What was odd was that he was going out of his way to not hurt her. "Starlight, everything okay?" I asked, not knowing what else to do. She ignored me. She merely held fast to her one-time friend and kept her eyes shut, occasionally rubbing a tear or two off on him. I felt so out of place just watching. Applejack tugged on my tail to get my attention. Let's let them be, Sugar Cube," she pointed out, implying there wasn't any danger. I hesitated until Shadowshot slowly gave up resisting and began just breathing softly. Soon after, his eyes changed from gold to his usual deep purple. "I love you, Hotshot," Starlight murmured quietly. Okay, now we were definitely intruding on personal time. Friends was not the appropriate word for what Starlight and Hotshot had, it seemed. I simply turned around and blinked for a few seconds. "That was surreal," I said as Applejack led me away. "It's been back and forth all day. We're doing just fine with the sun down, but something happened to the ram that Twi and Luna made," she said lowly, guiding me into town hall. "Them dark marks were fading pretty quick at first, but now they're starting to last longer and longer, and it's getting harder to save ponies that have been shadowed." That likely had something to do with Nightmare Soul and the rising sun, I thought to myself as we entered the building. The main building was filled with lots of ponies that I didn't know. Most of the Sky Archons and all of the main six were present, along with Luna, Cookie, and Nurse Tendercare. Luna was surrounded by the Archons, who were taking orders, but two things caught my attention specifically. The first was noticed by Stoic, which was Twilight Sparkle covered in dark marks and walking very tentatively. The second was noticed by Laughter, which was Sweetie Belle, sitting next to Rarity with a breakfast plate before her. It had eggs. Eggs! As worried as I was about Twilight, I was completely blown away by eggs being eaten by ponies. What the hell? I mean, I thought these guys were herbivores. The wonderment passed eventually, and I ran over to Twilight, who was crawling up on a bench to help make herself comfortable. "Twi, oh my gosh!" I helped her onto the bench. "What did you do, decide to run out to the front lines or something?" "Firewall!" she exclaimed tiredly and happily. "You made it!"
That's exactly what she did. Rarity huffed irritably as she brought Twilight a few pillows to help rest herself upon. We've been using the town hall as a stronghold, but when the Sky Archons began to tire from battling Nightmare Soul, she ran out through all the shadow ponies to help drive her off. Why, if it had not been for Princess Luna, we might have lost her. Twilight! I ever so gently bonked her head, causing her to giggle a tad. You're too important to take risks like that. I know, I had to help them, she murmured in an apologetic voice. I know it was dumb, a stupid risk really. If I had got shadowed while I was out there, we wouldn't be able to use the elements of harmony. I stepped up to the plate and delivered humor for relief. I was talking about Season 2, but I guess that's a good point as well. I joked with her a tad before sighing sadly. Are you okay? Yes, it doesn't hurt as much anymore, she assured me with a smile. Twice tough as nails, Rainbow Dash said, as she approached with a laugh, sucking Twi in the shoulder and causing her to wince. Oops, sorry. It's fine, Dash, she nodded with a grimace, and I'll be fine soon enough. Yeah, well, no more unnecessary heroics, okay? I pleaded. They give me gas. Oh, well, for the sake of your stomach. Twilight rolled her eyes playfully before looking behind me. Looks like some pony wants to talk with you. I turned to see Luna right behind me, tapping her hoof impatiently. I could imagine what was going through her head, but judging by the fact that she was within my proximity, I probably wouldn't like it. Twilight, is this buffoon bothering you? I'll have him thrown out, Luna offered with a smirk. Rainbow Dash held up a hoof. I'll do it, Your Highness. Yeah, I've got your buffoon right here, Luna, I said, giving Dash a half-hearted shove. Twilight began to laugh some more before finally replying. No need. I'm feeling extra tolerable today. Yeah, lunatic, I rasped her. Her response was to grab my tongue with her hoof and give it a tug. I'm just going to borrow this for a second. Get some rest, Twilight. She began to lead me away by my tongue, which is quite possibly the most uncomfortable method to be led around by. Every pony said their farewells as I sputtered an attempt to wave back at them. After leading me up to the second story of the town hall, she finally showed mercy and released my tongue. After flapping it about to alleviate the numbness, I gave her a sour look, to which she laughed before speaking. Sorry, had to get you up to speed and wanted to speak to you without every pony listening in, she explained with a smiling sigh. You could have just asked. I frowned sadly at her, to which she batted at me with her wing. Stop, jeez, you are so abusive. You'll live, she stated with a wing shrug before getting somewhat serious. Firewall, one of the elements of harmony is missing, and so is my nephew. Funny how 2 sentences can drain the silly right out of you and replace it with worried apprehension. What about Silverheart and Whirlwind? Weren't they guarding the rhyme of and the elements? I narrowed my eyes as I asked. Luna shook her head. I can't find them either. No pony has seen any of them since the sun rose. My blood ran a little cold as I began to wonder. Weren't the girls supposed to be with them? They were, until Twilight ran outside to help against Nightmare Soul, Luna confirmed with a sigh. I spoke softly, looking about to make sure no pony else was around to hear. Luna, be straight with me. Can we make it through this without the elements of harmony? If I had to guess right now, no. Her eyes lowered. I would not bet on it happening. Great. I face-hoofed before taking a deep breath. So we need to find the missing element and retrieve it as fast as possible. It's still nearby. As soon as the sun rose, Nightmare Soul fled the battle, so I'm told. Apparently she knows that if we use the elements of harmony on her, this battle is over. Okay, wait. Break the whole thing down for me, I asked, wanting to get as much of the situation in my head as was possible. For the next 2 cigarettes and 20 or so minutes, she explained the picture for me.
More or less, the ponies had piled into the town hall, while the non-combatants fled for safety amongst the buffalo tribe. Why the Cutie Mark Crusaders weren't there too, I'll never know. Regardless, the battle went well. It went very well. It went so well that they even pushed out of the town hall and began to truly put a dent into the numbers of the shadow ponies. Eventually, Nightmare Soul knew she would have to get involved to win this battle, and made a counter-push. Even with her arrival, though, the fight had mostly been a stalemate, without either side gaining ground due to the fact that Nightmare Soul had been outside of the sun for too long. Apparently she's like Superman in that regard or something. Then things took a turn for the worse. One of the elements of harmony, specifically the element of magic, was stolen, and the rhyme of eternal night was broken. As the sun began to rise, Nightmare Soul and all of her shadow ponies became stronger and were making a big push. Eventually the ponies were all forced back into the town hall, except for the Sky Archons, which were the only thing keeping Nightmare Soul from reducing the entire building to rubble. Under the sun's light, however, Nightmare Soul seemed to be tireless, while the Archons were not. So Twilight O.P. Sparkle took it upon herself to lay down the equestrian law by getting the jump on Nightmare Soul, blasting her out of the sky. She took a lot of hits from shadow ponies in the process, and was only just barely saved by Starlight and a group of brave ponies, driving them back long enough to get Twilight inside. Nightmare Soul came back once more, but was met with Luna, whom had been spending the last 3 nights under the light of the moon, and single-hoofedly repelled the next attack all on her own. "I don't suppose you could do that again?" I asked with a chuckle. "Not so much," she said with a look of chagrin. "It took a lot out of me, and while she exhausted herself just as much, she's in the sun and will have the strength to strike again before long. I won't regain that kind of strength back until moonrise. I doubt she's going to wait that long." "Then we'll have to find that element." I gave a nod before smiling. "We got this. We better, anyway. I don't think my pure heart could take it if we botched this up." "You're not going to cry on me again, are you?" she said with a laugh, before drooping her ears and lowering her head. "Since I may need to cry on you first." "If you gotta, you gotta," I said with a smile, stepping forward and pausing. How does one go about nuzzling in a comforting way? I don't want to screw this up and send mixed signals." "Firewall, I appreciate the gesture, but now is not the time." She blinked several times, somewhat thrown off by the question. After a few seconds she finally fell into laughing and bonked me on the head with her hoof. "You're so dumb," she giggled, before nuzzling at me in what I can assume was a proper way. Not that I can say that for certain. No pony ever took the time to break down the subtle nuances between pony cuddles and pony nuzzles. "I am not," I sighed with a reluctant smirk. "Get her!" I heard a pony shout from downstairs, followed by a lot of racket and a show pony crying out. "Shit!" I shouted before turning and bolting down the stairs. "Let go! Let go!" I had called it. Apparently, Trixie had indeed made her way into Appaloosa and was hiding in a brown cloak to mask her identity. When I had arrived, she was being held down by a storm archon, while another one bound her hooves. "Fireball!" she cried out pitifully. "Help!" "Help?" Luna was walking down the stairs behind me. Yeah, I probably should have warned some pony about Trixie, but to be frank, I didn't think she would do as I said. Still, I didn't appreciate the way those Archons were handling my Trixie. "Archon, what's your name?" I asked of the tawny-coated, silver-maned Archon holding her down. "Summerwind," she replied, a little confused. "And yours?" I repeated the question to the other Archon. I liked her look. She was a dark, rich green with a forest green mane and tail. I had figured out by this point that the artillery Archons didn't wear much armor, if any, and the sword Archons were the ones that were covered in it. She was one of the former, with a 4-leaf clover and a golden horseshoe on her flank. "Lucky," she answered with pride. Of course she was. She was extra lucky. "Lucky, I like it, because you are indeed lucky that I've restrained myself."
I said dramatically, not so amused anymore. It really is your lucky day. That's great. Now let her go before we start testing your luck, eh? We've got more important things to worry about. Like what? Lucky asked me as she released Trixie, who scrambled over behind me and next to Luna. Luna was still trying to figure out what was happening and what I was doing. Wasn't too sure myself. I don't exactly think these out. How about we hunt for royal ponies? I found mine. I reached out to tag Luna, earning a roll of the eye from her. Your turn. I guess you're going to have to find Prince Blueblood. Blueblood? You here, Brony? At first, I was getting skeptical looks, but it wasn't long before it finally started to sink in that he wasn't present. Every pony began murmuring questions to one another on who had seen him last. Oh, he seems to be missing, I pondered aloud. Who is missing? That annoyingly hearty voice came from the entrance. We all turned our heads to see one dirty-looking Prince Blueblood carrying Whirlwind on his back. Silverheart entered just beside him and began to scour the crowd as though looking for some pony. We all stared for a few seconds before Lucky smiled sheepishly. Found my royal pony! Apparently she is lucky. Who knew? Blueblood, where have you been? Luna asked, her eyes betraying her suspicion. I was, if you must know, He looked embarrassed, not guilty, just ashamed. I've been in the garbage. Looks like some pony got their flank, shades, trashed. We were ambushed by some pony with a sleep potion. I got a glimpse of him when he came downstairs, but... Silverheart let her voice trail off, still scanning the crowd before continuing. Last I saw before passing out was Prince Blueblood jumping our attacker. When I woke up, the three of us were stuffed in the garbage outside near the food line. Luna and myself were both quite relieved. It wasn't Prince Blueblood that stole the element of magic. My little pony prince was growing up to be quite the hero. Now he just needs to master the part where he succeeds in his heroic endeavors. Then who is the white and yellow colt that sabotaged the rhyme? I asked aloud. Trixie, are you with us? Luna looked down at the show pony, who immediately looked away. Who is the traitor? Why is Trixie with us? Silverheart asked, somewhat surprised. A lot of ponies made noises of similar confusion on the matter. I guess Trixie isn't as popular amongst ponies as she is with humans. For now, Trixie's playing on our team, okay? Right. I looked back at her. Yes, she nodded, still refusing to look at us. But I can't help you. Bloody, why not? I asked of her. I just can't. She winced away from me as though I were going to hit her. I promise, I just can't. Are you under a spell, Trixie? Luna asked, taking note of how Trixie was now grimacing. I'm hungry. Where's the food line? Who do I talk to about food here? She shouted abruptly, raising a hoof to her head as though she were in pain. Get me a chef, or a... Trixie suddenly knelt down as though she were in pain, crying out rather suddenly. If she weren't sweating, I would have thought she was just acting, but there was no mistaking that something was definitely wrong. Luna stiffened all over before looking around frantically. Cookie! This is hardly the time for food. I leaned over and murmured, trying to figure out Luna's angle as to why she was playing along. Shut up! She ordered impatiently before yelling at the Arkans. Arkans, bring me Cookie, now! Arkans of all shapes, sizes and colors went into motion, scaring every pony else. After a few seconds of almost complete silence, the sound of a broken window pierced the air and was quickly followed by Silverheart's voice. Here! She cried. I bolted to here, and to my surprise, Cookie was fighting to get out of a busted window with Silverheart yanking on his tail and pulling him back in. I was so sad on the inside as I realized what it all meant. Then I felt stupid for not picking up on the earlier clues. It had been rather obvious, I just never stopped to consider the possibility. Damn it, I whined as I cantered over to grab him by the mane with my mouth and yank him along to Luna with Silverheart's help.
Yellow and white, not a white coat and yellow mane, white mane and yellow coat, Luna clarified as she helped Trixie up. I should have known.
We tossed the chef pony down in front of Luna, where he gave a struggling and just looked away sadly.
You were in Canterlot, yet you somehow got here with the Ponyville citizens long before you should have,
Luna growled at him. Applejack looked horrified, to say the least, and when Cookie caught sight of her, he lowered his head and shut his eyes. I was sad, too. No more candied carrots. Pork you, Rosalita!
What do you have to say, Cookie?
She snapped angrily. Thank you, Trixie, he murmured before looking up at Luna with shame. You are braver than me. With a bizarre thing to say, I caught myself thinking before looking over to Trixie, who nodded happily at him. Then I heard the derp and realized that's why Trixie was shouting about food. She was giving us clues, and luckily Luna was smart enough to pick up on it. Thank God it wasn't all depending on me.
Who are you working for?
Luna asked scathingly.
The Nightmare?
I can't. He looked back down. You know who else keeps saying that? I said aloud, bringing attention to myself.
Azure Flora. You know who else kept also saying that?
Trixie. Luna nodded, having also made the correlation.
Is the Nightmare your master?
No, Cookie replied, wincing a tad.
Is it David?
I asked next.
I just can't.
He shut his eyes again, grimacing even more. It's him, I nodded before looking up to Luna. It's the other human.
Shadow ponies!
The voice of the current Archon on sentry duty interrupted everything we were doing.
Silverheart, take these two downstairs and keep them from leaving.
Luna pointed at Trixie and Cookie before turning to every pony else.
Every pony that can help, get ready. Thank you, Fireball.
Trixie smiled at me as she was led away. I considered telling her she was still getting it wrong, but I figured I should just let her keep calling me that until some pony else corrected her and made her feel silly. Such pointless thoughts were quickly replaced by an urgent need that I was reminded of when I looked over to see Twilight, who seemed to be feeling quite a bit better.
Luna, we've got to find that last element.
I pressed for her attention as Silverheart took the two ponies to the cellar.
Leave the battle to Starlight.
Luna looked conflicted for a moment, but eventually nodded before calling out.
Commander Starlight!
Suddenly enough, she was walking through the south entrance, helping a very tired, yet less shadowed hotshot walk. She looked up at the sound of her name and helped her significant other to a nearby bench before rushing over to Luna.
Yes, Luna?
She purposefully did not use the word princess or highness.
We need to use the elements of harmony, but to do that, we need to find the element of magic, she explained quickly. I'm leaving you in charge while we find them.
Understood, she replied with a salute.
I'll take care of everything.
With that said, every pony began to disperse except a small skeleton guard for the town hall, and those too weary to fight stayed behind while me and Luna began to think of ways to track down the element of magic. Obviously, we couldn't ask Cookie since he literally couldn't tell us, and the alternative could have been to go out into the war zone and start tearing down Appaloosa. I don't think I have to tell you that would have not blessed us with any results within our needed time frame. However, knowing what we couldn't do didn't help us, as we were more needing to know what we could do to find the stupid thing.
You can't try scrying it or something?
I pressed as she continued to rack her brain.
That doesn't actually work, she countered with a huff. Just let me think.
I began to pace back and forth, trying to think of something more helpful. Firewall uses think. It's not very effective. So I just decided to pull out a cigarette. I did not like how I was doing nothing while the other ponies were fighting outside. After a few minutes I became impatient and decided it would be better to be useful elsewhere.
"Look, you see what you can do. I'm going to help the other ponies," I announced, heading for the entrance, looking at the ponies guarding it to keep shadow ponies from entering. I'm trying, Firewall. I really am," Luna protested, running up beside me. "Please, just give me some time." "I know you've got this," I smiled back at her. "Come find me when you've got something." I nodded at the guards, who opened the door for me. Now, you'd expect I'd go outside and fight, but as it turned out, the fight came to me. Specifically in the form of in-flight Shadow Archon. I freaked out, thinking I was under attack as I fell back and tumbled to a stop in front of Luna. As it turned out, it was simply in flight because it had been bugged that hard. By Applejack, surprisingly enough. She galloped in and tackled the Archon, holding it down as my vision began to clear up. "Fluttershy, hurry up, darling," she shouted out. I'm coming." Fluttershy squeaked timidly as she flew in. I got up as the Archon struggled and simply ran over to help hold him down. Applejack nodded at me with a smile as Fluttershy approached. Luna arched an eyebrow. "What are you all doing?" "That's a good question. Why are we holding down this Archon here?" I asked, getting my answer right away when Fluttershy knelt down to nuzzle at the Shadow Archon. I blinked in confusion. I am a big advocate for pony love and all, but this was a little much. Not to mention the timing. As I opened my mouth to comment on this, however, the Shadow Archon almost instantly puffed back into a girl pony who slumped down tiredly. "Great job!" Starlight flew in and sighed down at her newly freed Archon. "Good to have you back." "What was that?" I tilted my head in shock as we released her.
"Oh, I saw a hurt shadow pony. He looked so sad and I felt so bad for him. I just felt compelled to go help him and give him a hug and it turned him back," Fluttershy explained, timidly kicking at the floor as though she should be ashamed.
"Indeed, it was almost instant," Starlight nodded. "And Applejack doesn't seem to be affected by the touch of any shadow ponies." "What? So the element bearers have special powers?" I blinked in shock. Luna's eyes were wide as saucers. None of us could have anticipated such a turn of events, but that rocked, to be sure. I smiled at her, to which she gave a contemplative scowl. "What about the others, Rarity and Rainbow Dash?" Luna asked, looking back at the others. "I ain't seen what Rarity, but I've seen Rainbow Dash's trick. Rainbow charges any shadow pony she touches into a rainbow pony that attacks other shadow ponies," Applejack said with a crooked eyebrow, as so it made no sense to her. "We haven't been doing much fighting before now, but we're really making a difference. Come on, Fluttershy."
"Oh, right,"
Fluttershy said with a smile before cantering for the door, pausing by me to hold up her hoof. At first, I didn't get what she was doing until she poked at me. "Flutterbro hoof," I shouted, and clopped her hoof, to which she smiled more brightly and flew out. "We might not even need the elements of harmony if this keeps up." Starlight gave a hopeful smile before saluting. "Stay safe." I turned to help Summerwind to a resting bench, speaking to Luna as Starlight left. "Maybe we should just help in the battle and worry about the element later?" "I'm not so she began to say before Rarity bucked the door back open, interrupting her. The guards gave a look as though they didn't even know why they were there anymore.
"Twilight!"
Rarity cried out as she ran past us. From across the town hall, Twilight tiredly lifted her head with a wince. "Rarity, what's wrong?" I opened my mouth to greet Rarity, but needn't bother, for she ran right past us all and aimed her horn at Twilight. Without a word, she shined, and for a moment and a flash later, Twilight was cleaned of all her black marks, her looks of paint fatigue replaced with confusion and wonder. "Ha! Rarity, you are amazing!" Rarity took the time to marvel at her own greatness. I couldn't blame her. I was marveling at said greatness too. Rarity Pony is best pony. Twilight slowly slipped off the bench before smiling at her clean hoof.
She hugged the other unicorn with a cheer. Me and Luna simply stared in awe as they danced about for a few seconds.
So I guess they could always do that?
Luna blinked in shock before taking on a skeptical expression.
This just seems off.
Shh! I waved a hoof at her angrily.
Don't jinx it. Since when could the elements of harmony manifest in any fashion without each other?
She gave me a cursory glance.
Are you complaining?
I returned the look.
I suppose not, but...
Her voice trailed off.
I know I saw Applejack with a shadow mark earlier.
I recalled Applejack's mark over her eye and how novel it looked. I stammered a bit, attempting to justify everything before throwing out the reliable catch-all.
It's magic. I ain't gotta explain shit,
I cried, earning an unimpressed look from Luna. Twilight ran out of the town hall, opening the doors once more as the guards simply gave up and went outside to join in the fight. It wasn't like every pony wasn't going to go in and out all day anyway. Rarity began to run to other ponies with their own marks and began cleaning them off similarly. Let's go and worry about the elements later. Best to press the advantage while we have it, I said with a smile. She sighed and gave a wing shrug.
I can't think of any reason not to.
With that, we ran outside and weren't entirely surprised to see the battle being pressed further and further away. I mean, I could just sit here and describe how we dived in and started pawning, but really, it goes like this. Fire breath here, shiny magic there, shadow pony goes poof, unless it was converted pony, in which case we just hold it down until Fluttershy showed up. As for her touching shadow ponies, it was never explained to me until later that converted shadow ponies cannot convert other ponies, just the ones that go poof and stuff. I mean, I know this is in Equestria, and things don't just die and such, but I was still amazed at how much we were starting to push back this tide of shadow. Once the numbers shifted in our favor, the shadow ponies began to run away. That's when Deus Ex Machina appeared. See, I was very focused on kicking shadow butt, but the interruption scared me. It was not an interruption that I was prepared for, not to mention it was very sudden and in the form of Pinkie Pie jumping on my back, squealing in delight.
"Fire!"
she cried, hugging my neck from behind.
"I missed you!"
Just because I'm a pony doesn't mean I'm a mount. It was degrading. But Pinkie Pie does what she likes, and if you think you can stop her, just try. You will fail, as many have before you.
"Pinkie, I'm busy,"
I whined, trying to shake her off, which caused her to cheer happily and wave her hoof around as though she were riding a wild bull.
Get off me!"
She wasn't going anywhere. I gave up and just sat there, utterly tamed. "Okay, what do you want?"
"You're a winner,"
she said with a laugh.
"The nice voice said that this belonged to you."
With that, she plopped something onto my head. It felt like hairband, and all at once I began to both squee and panic. I threw it forward off my head, and sure enough, I was right. Twilight's crown of magic. I just kinda stared at it in a freakishly happy sort of way.
"You don't like it?"
Pinkie deflated a bit and lowered her head beside mine, pouting a tad. "Pinkie, if I fail to resist the urge to kiss you, don't tell Luna," I murmured very somberly as I picked it up with a bit of magic.
"Oh my gosh, she'll banish me to the sun!"
she shrieked sarcastically before bonking her head into mine.
"So what now?"
"First you tell me about this voice in your head." I looked at her with a smirk. "Brain voices are bad."
"You had brain voices,"
she accused instantly, bouncing on my back a few times to emphatically indicate me as a subject. My jaw dropped before instantly going right back as I shook my head. "I'm not going to even ask how you know that. Just tell me about it."
"Well, it started talking to me and Rarity and Dashie and Applejack and—"
She started to list off on her hoofs as though she were counting on non-existent fingers. We got derailed by retreating ponies that almost ran us over.
"Nightmare Soul! Get back, every pony!"
I heard Commander Starlight shout above the commotion. "Arkans, form up!" "Crap, we're out of time." I panicked a tad. "Quick, go get the other elements and bring them to us." "Okie dokie dokie!" She nodded before spurring my flanks with hoofs that had no spurs whatsoever. "Away, Firewall!" I sat there, taking the time to glance back at her irritably. One awkward moment later, she hopped off with a pout, giving me a playful shove for not going along with it and running back for Appaloosa. I gave a relieved face-off before spotting Rainbow Dash and using my Fury Speedy Sing to catch up to her. No, she wasn't going very fast, and that's the only reason I was able to head her off. "Dash!" I cried, cutting her off. "Wah!" She hit the brakes and looked down at me with a curious look. "Firewall, you've got to warn some pony before rushing up like that. I nearly bucked you, you know." "You'll live," I rebuked her complaints. "Get the others. Pinky's going to bring the elements of harmony. We're gonna end this." "Awesome!" Her eyes lit up like a beacon, and without any hesitation whatsoever, she sped off to find the others. Long story short, too late. I had to give that stupid explanation to Twilight, Applejack, Rarity, Fluttershy, Luna, and Starlight, individually. I got so tired of having to spout it out that I made a promise to knock out the next pony that asked me. Then we started waiting for Pinkie Pie. The Arkans were proving to be the best time provider ever. I mean, Nightmare Soul was doing her damnedest to try and take them out, but there was no denying that she couldn't land a hit. As fast as they were, she was having trouble just trying to focus on anything. Every time she'd look at an Arkan, it would be retreating as another one came in and took a shot at her, distracting her from her target. "So, how long can they keep that up?" I blinked, mesmerized by the spectacle. "Not forever." Starlight looked around for some pony. "How long ago did you send Pinkie Pie?" "Long enough for her to have grabbed a snack on the way there and back." I gave an irritated sigh. Finally, Nightmare Soul decided to just ignore the Arkans, which really was the best thing she could do. Instead, she made a beeline for the city, trailing the Pegasi warriors behind her. Dash, go get Pinkie," I ordered as my eyes widened. "On it!" Whoosh! Rainbow-colored dust cloud suddenly where Dashy once was. Next thing I did was run over to Applejack and lift her head up. "What in the hay do you call yourself a-doin'?" Applejack leaned away from me to no avail as I hit the crown of magic under it. "Shush!" I demanded before looking at Rarity and Fluttershy. "Just play cool, girls. We just might get through this." Fluttershy cowered a bit before taking refuge behind Rarity, who was putting on a brave face, despite the fact that she was likely just as scared as we were. I mean, this was it. Last stand, no point in running. Just go for the slug out and see who wins, right? "We've still got the Arkans," Starlight reminded us as she watched Nightmare Soul fly closer and closer. "Indeed." Twilight nodded before taking a deep breath and letting it out. "We just have to hold out." Nightmare Soul noticed us as she neared and altered her flight path, aiming right for us. Luna stepped out in front and gave a snort, not intimidated in the least. That made one of us. "This battle is over!" Nightmare Soul cried out before suddenly turning back to the Arkans and unleashing a blinding light at them. My sweet, useless eyes. As the light faded, in place of all the Sky Arkans were Shadow Arkans. I could feel the sweat beading up all over my body. She began to guffaw in that cliché villain laugh thing that all villains do when they've pretty much won. I guess the bad guys get their Deus Ex Machina as well. The Arkans formed ranks behind her and began snarling eagerly. I can't." Starlight was reflecting my sentiments of hopelessness. "Shall we discuss terms, Princess Luna?" Nightmare Soul drifted down slowly to land before us, smiling like, well, Trollestia, to be honest. "Surrender yourself, the human and Commander Starlight.
If you do, I shall spare the other ponies, allowing them their freedom. Oh, and the elements of harmony." "Not going to happen," Twilight shouted angrily, her eyes glowing threateningly. "Such a terrible way to speak to your teacher, dearest student," Nightmare Soul chuckled before glancing at me with a smile. "Surely you would like to spare as many as possible, Firewall? Think of the ponies that would go free if you gave yourself up." I lost all of my unease and hopelessness in an instant, snarling angrily. "Remember when I told you I would be the one to destroy you? Because I do, and nothing has changed since that day." "Foolish human!" She snorted angrily before turning back to Luna. "Stop this charade, Luna. This is over. It's time to be a leader and put the lives of your subjects ahead of your own." "Shut up!" Luna stomped with a glowing hoof, shaking the ground about us. "You'll get us when you take us. The only surrendering I'll be doing is when I surrender to sleep after a long hard day of thrashing your flank from here back to Canterlot." "Do not make me laugh," Nightmare Soul chuckled before taking another step forward. "Hey guys, I found Pinkie Pie!" Rainbow Dash suddenly arrived by air with Pinkie Pie in her hoofs. "And I found the elements!" Pinkie Pie declared in triumph as she kicked her legs gaily. Surely enough, she had all the necklaces wrapped over her own neck. "No! Archons, destroy them!" Nightmare Soul did not like this development at all. However, the next one was even more surprising. "I think not." The voice of Winter Sky came down from above, causing us all to look up just as he landed betwixt us all. The dust kicked up shrouded him like something out of a DBZ for a few seconds. "It's been a long time, Nightmare." "No!" Nightmare Soul stepped back quite a few times. "I don't believe it." "Believe it." He gave a laugh as a wave of his wings flew away all the dust, revealing him and all his pony glory. I got that tingly sensation all over. Duel of the Fates started playing in my head and everything went still for a few seconds. And I mean everything. The Shadow Archons, me, Luna, the main six, even Dashi forgot to land and start handing out the elements. "No! Impossible!" Nightmare Soul shrieked as she began to emit a sinisterly golden glow. "You're supposed to be dead!" "Just keep telling yourself that as I tear you out of her," he murmured as his armor and coat began to frost over, causing steam to trail off of his body completely. "I saw you die!" she roared in disbelief. "Yeah." He crouched down, ready to break into a gallop. "Just like that." "I'll make sure you stay dead this time," she bellowed before rearing up and stomping, causing a light to burst from the ground around her. "Archons, take no prisoners!" Every pony suddenly burst into motion. Twilight magicked the main six to her and projected the shield around them as they began to pass the elements of harmony out. Luna, Starlight, and myself put ourselves between them and the Shadow Archons, daring them to make the attempt. And attempt they did. They completely ignored Winter Sky and went straight for us. I lit my fire shield as Luna's horn began to glow and Starlight's feathers became electrically charged. It wasn't too necessary, however, since Stormwing decided to make his own dramatic entrance right on top of the lead Sky Archon, putting him out of the fight. Altogether, that made 4 of us versus roughly 20 Shadow Archons. I didn't stop to count, sue me. Winter Sky and Nightmare Soul went right at it, creating quite a racket for us to fight to and utterly drowning out my awesome Star Wars head music, but that really didn't matter so much. I wasn't able to catch the first half of their fight due to the fact that they were holding back the Shadow Archons, but really we didn't try to win. Just by time. We did alright. I mean, it was so chaotic. I can't even remember most of what happened, but we did our job. I remember lots of hoofs swinging around, shouting, fire, lightning, and light getting tossed around.
One particularly amusing thing I remember was a bunch of Archons tackling Stormwing and trying to overbear him. Then they all sucked more lightning than is healthy for one's lifestyle. My best contribution was when they began to ignore us and attack the shield. I hopped on top of it and covered it in fire, forcing them back long enough for the girls to finish powering up the elements.
"Get back, every pony!"
Twilight called out, queuing us to all get out of the way.
"No!"
I heard Nightmare Soul cry out as I jumped off the shield and ducked down, covering my head with my hooves. Not sure why. It's not like it was a grenade or anything.
"The friendship rainbow grenade. When thou lobbest thine friendship rainbow grenade, thou shalt countest to 3.
The shield dropped, and out of it burst a rainbow that shot straight into the sky. It twirled a few times, blinding us all with its awesome and win before soaring back down to the ground. It was like magic.
"Not again!"
Nightmare Soul took flight and flew away from the elements of harmony. Rainbow Dash, as it beamed after her, followed closely by Winter Sky. It slowly caught ground as we all stared in wonder. I decided to give it a little help and aimed a stream of fire to cut her off. It almost worked, but the idea quickly spread to the others who began trying to trip her up. Aerial targets are quite evasive, sadly enough. Shortly thereafter, the Shadow Archons all took flight and began to literally throw themselves in its path. To their credit, it did slow down upon overtaking every Archon, but it simply regained its speed after they exhausted their numbers to buy Nightmare Soul a little more time. Time that she used to fire a beam of light down at us, or rather the elements of harmony.
"No!"
I quickly stepped up to the plate of stupid heroic and threw my shield itself in its path, getting knocked back and crashing into Fluttershy and Applejack, breaking the spell. I would have taken the time to berate myself, but I was busy writing on the ground like a worm on a hot plate. That light was intense. Break out your SPF 2,000,000 for when you go out in that kind of light.
"Ha!"
Nightmare Soul flared brightly in triumph as the now cleansed Sky Archons gently floated to the ground.
"You have not yet won!"
Cliché villain lines. Why must she? Thankfully, Winter Sky tackled her and drove her down into the ground right in front of us. That'll teach her to cliché around us.
"Use them again!"
Stormwing yelled out before jumping in to help fight, quickly followed by Luna and Starlight.
"Get back!"
Winter Sky roared, planting a hoof on Nightmare Soul's face and another one on her wing to help keep her pinned.
"She'll turn you if she gets a chance."
Nightmare Soul pulled the same trick as Shadow Shot had pulled on me, and struck him in the face with her spare wing, before bucking him off and jumping to her feet.
"What a marvelous idea!"
She immediately blasted a wave of light at Stormwing, who barely got out of the way in time. Winter Sky was back in an instant, body-checking her into the air before blasting her away with a thunderous flap of his wings.
"Stay back, she can't turn me,"
he quickly explained before taking flight. I continued to shiver in pain, only barely able to keep track of what was going on before getting a helping hoof from Luna, in the form of that awesome Healy trick that Celestia had used on me way back in the day. Fine, so maybe it was just a week.
"Why is he immune?"
Starlight asked, as Stormwing angrily stomped, not happy with being unable to help. "Who knows?" I said with a groan as I got to my hoofs with the help of Pinkie Pie and Rarity. "Thanks. Whatever, let's just poop her with the elements again."
"Right."
Twilight nodded and looked at the others.
"Ready, girls?"
Luna started to speak, looking somewhat fearful. She cut herself off, however, and simply nodded at them. The girls have assorted sounds of consent and agreement before forming back for the twice elements of harmony. As they began to crank it back up and go all floaty, however, they quickly fell back to the ground. Luna sighed as she walked over to help Applejack back up.
"The elements are exhausted.
I figured that would be the case. Well, what do we do now? AJ's expression was a mirror of Stormwing's, angry frustration. I don't know. Luna shook her head before turning back to watch the battle between Winter Sky and Nightmare Soul. Really, it wasn't much of a battle. It was a beating. Winter Sky had once told me that the princesses weren't chosen for their ability to fight. Sky, however, obviously had been chosen for that very thing. Every spell she threw continued to barely miss its mark. Every movement she made provided Sky with an opening to strike, and every break in combat allowed him to get more of an edge on her. Brutal was only a shadow of a description of what was taking place here. However, despite his overwhelming advantage, Nightmare Soul wasn't showing any signs of fatigue or wear. "I'm limitless in the sun," she declared, flaring her tail at him, to which he severed around and yanked her down by her hooves. He then froze her wings and aimed her downward, driving her as fast as he could towards the surface. "I am invincible!" She began to laugh as the ground neared, no longer struggling against her attacker. He ignored her gloating and simply followed through, crashing her into the ground so hard that she dug a trench with her body as he continued to drive her force behind her. For a moment we all stood and watched, a silent, unmoving audience witnessing this event. It was almost painful to continue observing, if you must know the truth. "No, you aren't," Luna murmured softly before looking back at all of us. "Twilight, can you give me whatever magic you have left?" Of course, Princess." Twilight nodded immediately, focusing on her horn. "Is this a pony thing, or can we all pitch in?" I asked, walking up beside Twilight. Rarity approached from the other side of her. "Of course you can, Firewall. It's easy, one simply needs will it to happen." "Can't hurt," I said with a grin before winking at Luna. "Let's do it." And so I got to find out what it was like to go completely bereft of magic. Even the Inmanpulon had not completely robbed me of everything like this. It was like I was suddenly freezing all over, all at once. Everything I had went straight to Luna, along with Rarity's and Twilight's likewise donations. Luna began to shine a soft silver light that only grew in intensity as she looked up at the eerie red sun. No big flash, no loud thunderous blast, just a twinkling sound as the moon slowly drifted forward to block out the sun, darkening the land with its shade. "Our magics will block out the sun." "Amazing!" Starlight uttered as she watched the spectacle. Poor Stormwing couldn't see it, but he at least understood what was happening. At least that's what I assumed, judging by the big smile on his face. "I can't hold this for long." Luna's words were forcefully strained. I totally understood the sentiment. I was giving everything I had out of hopes that it would help, but I was already pretty well spent. "Now, finish it!" Stormwing yelled out to his father. "No!" Nightmare Soul cried out, suddenly eager to get away from Winter Sky. I expected Winter Sky to shout out "Vengeance" or "Justice" or something awesome like that. However, he opted not to speak. Instead, he became transparent and ghostly before flying after his target. He struck her like a freight train, but rather than her being knocked away, there was a quick flash that didn't blind us for once. It was like a flicker of a camera, really. What happened next was twice as awesome as blocking out the sun. It was as though he passed right through her, and in fact he did. Only Celestia was falling to the ground, and the nightmare was with him rather than her. He hurled it to the ground not 20 feet from us, and chased it the entire way, flashing brilliantly like a strobe light. The same light that Luna had used to coalesce it into its armor-like form. As expected, it had the exact same effect, and within moments it was completely solid. "No! Oh!" it shrieked, in that disembodied voice as he continued to close the gap, still flickering brilliantly. "That's game, Nightmare!" I shouted victoriously. I should have just kept my mouth shut. I know I totally jinxed it. You probably thought the same thing. Because I did. Just before impact, a sky-blue blast of light seared past from behind us all and struck Winter Sky in the back.
"Trixie!"
Luna cried out as we all looked back. There she was, staring at us sadly with Azure Flora and Cookie in tow. I did not approve. "Why? What do you think you are doing?" Stormwing lunged at them, only to get blocked by a wall of Imanpolon that Azure Flora created. She quickly wrapped it around him, rendering him pretty freaking helpless. Luna aimed her horn at them, but held back from firing just yet.
"You are under a spell, aren't you?"
The three of them looked down at the ground, all in unison. They looked as pitiful as you could possibly manage. I would have felt sorry for them if I hadn't been so agitated by the interference. I ran over to Stormwing to try and help him out of his bindings. It wasn't a cage as much as it was a metal sheet.
"Help?"
"Starlight, keep an eye on them," Luna ordered as she moved over to help me pry it open.
"I'm sorry, I can't,"
Starlight murmured softly. More feelings of dread. "What?" I turned to her. "When did you get bewitched?" "I can answer that." Another disembodied voice. How quaint. Why you can't throw a horseshoe without some ghostly voice telling you you're doing it wrong. A thunderous black portal opened, matching the ones that Trixie and Azure Flora had been using in the past. Through it walked a human. Not just any human. It was Harry Potter. Okay, maybe it wasn't Harry Potter, but the dude had one hell of a resemblance. He was tall, lanky, raven-haired, and was wearing a fleece maroon sweater. Yes, he even had the stupid glasses, though they were rectangular in shape. Sorry, I can't make this shit up. "It was when Starlight traded her freedom for hotshots," he said in a matter-of-fact tone. "Just like Cookie had done for his little sister, Sugar Dust. And when Trixie traded hers for power and Azure Flora had done for the revival of Winter Sky."
"David!"
Winter Sky got back up and flew over, landing right in front of the human.
"I knew it was you."
"Sky," he sighed with a reluctant smirk. 1,000 years has been too long, old friend.